In a captivating opening scene, 7-year-old Kate enjoys a warm summer day outside with her friends. The children laugh and chase each other, the scent of fresh grass and blooming trees filling the air. Suddenly, Kate stops and glances back, noticing a man in an old van parked at the end of the street. He is slouched casually in the seat, yet his intense gaze is focused on the children. Kate's heart races as she senses something is wrong. The stranger's stare is filled with unease as if he is studying their every move. Despite her growing anxiety, she decides not to share her fears with her parents. She doesn't want to cause unnecessary alarm or seem overly sensitive. Instead, Kate tries to regain her composure by joining the game, but thoughts of the strange man continue to plague her. The other children are oblivious and keep playing happily, but Kate steals glances at the van. The man remains motionless as if an invisible thread connects him to them. Each time she loses focus, she feels his penetrating gaze on her again. As if he is watching her every move. Occasionally, Kate thinks she should just leave the playground, but she can't bring herself to disrupt the joyful fun. As the sun begins to set, the children finally decide it's time to head home. Kate hesitates, her heart pounding as she grabs her toy and takes one last look at the van. The man is no longer watching, he has turned his gaze away, but this does not ease her mind. An inexplicable feeling of dread lingers, and staring at the ground, Kate heads home. Deciding she will tell her mother about the man tomorrow. Years later, when Kate turns 10, she unexpectedly encounters the van that once frightened her. This happens on a sunny day when she visits the park with her mother. The park is alive with activity, children laugh and play while parents chat on benches. Kate tries to enjoy the atmosphere, but her attention is involuntarily drawn to a familiar vehicle parked at the roadside. The van, as old and worn as the day she first saw it, sits on the edge of the road. The dark windows suggest that no one is inside, yet, a strange feeling engulfs Kate once more, and she cannot shake off the memories of how she felt under that man's unsettling gaze. Inside her, anxiety reignites, but she struggles to explain it to her mother. Kate discreetly glances at her mom, who is admiring beautiful flowers and smiling while chatting with neighbors. She fears that if she mentions the van, her mother will simply dismiss her. After all, it's just an old vehicle, and she's not a little girl anymore to be scared of such things. Kate's gaze returns to the van, and she resolves it's merely a coincidence, though deep down, she senses otherwise. However, her fears refuse to fade. She quietly reassures herself that perhaps it's all just her imagination, a product of childhood anxiety. She tries again to focus on the time spent with her mother, but thoughts of the van keep nagging her. With each passing moment, it seems increasingly ominous. Suddenly, Kate notices the van starting to move slowly, leaving the parking spot. Her heart sinks as she realizes it's not just her imagination, it's leaving the road, and the sight fills her with anxiety and a sense of incompleteness. She turns to her mother, but her mom continues to look the other way. At that moment, Kate feels old fears start to resurface, and the invisible secrets stored in her memory fill her heart with dread once more. After her father's death, Kate feels lost. The funeral was silent and somber, and the house was filled with memories of how her dad was always there. One day, while climbing up to the attic, she decided to sort through the old belongings he left behind. In the corner, she found a dusty box full of tapes and notes forgotten by time. Curious, she pulled out one of the tapes and found an old tape recorder sitting on a nearby shelf. Sitting on the floor, Kate pressed the play button. Suddenly, her father's voice enveloped her, familiar and so dear. He spoke about his work, emphasizing the importance of being cautious, especially when it came to strangers. The seriousness in his voice was alarming. Kate listened intently, and soon the recording shifted to a conversation about the man in the van, the same one she had seen in her childhood. Her father shared his concerns and suspicions, revealing that he had been keeping an eye on this man for many years. He spoke of strange circumstances surrounding the van, mentioning he had seen it in various places. Each time with a growing sense of dread. Determination resonated in his voice. He sought to protect the family, though Kate couldn't grasp from what exactly. Her father warned her about the importance of caution and always being vigilant. Kate felt her heart race as she realized that all these years, her father had been worried about her, shielding her from an invisible threat. With each new snippet of the tape, Kate delved deeper into memories of her father's insistence that family was everything and that he would never leave them unprotected. The notes in the box complemented the recordings. They contained detailed descriptions of observations of the van and suspicions regarding its driver. Kate replayed the tapes over and over, her fear and anxiety intertwining with feelings of bitterness and loss. Now that her father was gone, these tapes became her only link to his care. A new sense emerged within her, a need to learn more about the van and its owner, as well as what her father had tried to shield her from. After Kate listened to the tapes, she couldn't wait to share her discovery with her mother. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, she gathered her courage and began to recount the story of the box in the attic and the recordings that revealed another side of her father's life. Her mother tensed at the mention of the man in the van. "You have no idea how we lived with your father," she said, her voice trembling with memories. "It was a time when he worried about us. He never spoke of his fears, but I sensed something was wrong. Every time he left for work, there was a strange look in his eyes, and he always told us to be careful." Kate listened with bated breath, hanging on her mother's every word. She realized that her father's fears weren't mere paranoia, they were based on genuine concerns. He installed security cameras, and often stepped outside to check if that van was nearby, her mother added, tears welling up in her eyes. "I thought it was just his habit of being cautious, but now I understand that he truly feared for our safety." Memories of her father's watchful nature began flooding back to Kate. She recalled a day when she and her mother were coming home, and her father unexpectedly asked her about a man who frequently walked by their house. He scrutinized everyone who stepped outside and sometimes even jotted down license plate numbers. She never understood why he acted that way, but now it all took on new meaning. "I often saw him peering out the windows, checking if anything strange was happening," her mother continued, her voice dropping to a hushed, frightened tone. "He wasn't just protecting us from physical threats, he was shielding us from anything that might jeopardize our safety." Kate realized her father had been more than a parent, he was a guardian, fiercely watching over his family even before they recognized the dangers lurking around them. These secret actions of her father left a profound impact on Kate. She felt a deep sense of responsibility to complete his mission, to uncover what was happening and understand who was hiding behind that van. A new determination blossomed within her, a desire to learn the truth and protect her family, just as her father had. Kate and her mother decided that moving to a new neighborhood was necessary for a fresh start. They packed all their belongings, and although Kate felt a heaviness in her heart from the loss of her father, she hoped that the new environment would help them forget the worries of the past. Their new home was cozy, with a small garden and friendly neighbors eager to introduce themselves and assist with the move. For a while, it seemed like life might indeed get better. Kate began to forge friendships with the neighborhood kids while her mother worked to create a new atmosphere at home, decorating it with photographs and items that brought joy. However, Kate soon realized that memories of the past continued to haunt her. Every rustle, every unfamiliar sound returned her to the thought that safety was merely an illusion. One evening, after a long and tiring day filled with unpacking, Kate decided to relax on the terrace. The night was quiet, and the stars sparkled against the dark sky. She gazed at the moon, pondering how everything seemed fine when suddenly her eyes fell on the street. Her heart raced as she spotted the same van that once terrified her parked by their new home. Panic washed over her, and a chill ran down her spine. She couldn't believe that this van was here again. All her hopes for a new life and a clean slate crumbled like a house of cards. She jumped up and, barely holding her shaking voice, rushed inside to find her mother, who was preparing dinner in the kitchen. "Mom, the van, it's back," Kate shouted, her voice trembling with fear. Her mother turned, her expression shifting as she seemed to freeze for a moment. "What van?" she asked, a hint of concern creeping into her tone. But Kate was already rushing to the window to show her what she meant. When they both looked outside, the van stood motionless, as if it were simply waiting. Kate's mother felt an instant surge of worry, and Kate realized they couldn't escape their past. Memories of her father's stories about the van flooded her mind, and she recalled how important it was to be vigilant. It felt as though an invisible thread connected her to that ominous vehicle, and Kate understood that her fears were only intensifying in this new place. Now, with the threat once again close by, she felt compelled to uncover the truth about the van and its owner before it became a grim reality. Kate felt fear tightening in her chest as she gazed at the van parked outside their new home. Memories of her father's recordings and his warnings about strangers flooded her mind. She knew she couldn't remain passive. With trembling fingers, she pulled out her phone and, dialing the police number, tried to maintain her composure. "Hello, I'd like to report a suspicious van parked outside my house," she said, doing her best not to betray the fear in her voice. The officer on the other end assured her that a patrol would be dispatched, and Kate felt a flicker of relief. She knew she had taken the right step. Minutes passed, feeling like an eternity, until a patrol car finally pulled up to their house. Kate rushed outside, pointing at the van that was still sitting in the same spot when she made the call. The officers stepped out of the car, and her heart swelled with hope. This would all be resolved now. But as they approached the van, Kate noticed with alarm that it had vanished. In that instant, her hope turned to panic. The officers began to search the area, but they found no trace of the vehicle. One officer, tall and friendly, turned to Kate and said, "Sweetheart, it's likely just a coincidence. Maybe someone left when you called." Kate felt her heart sink with disappointment. "But I saw it. It was here," she insisted, the rising anxiety bubbling within her. The officers exchanged glances, only deepening her sense of isolation. "We'll keep an eye on the neighborhood," said another officer, but that didn't calm her. When the police left, leaving her in silence, Kate felt that no one understood her fear. She stood on the sidewalk, staring at the space where the van had just been. All her worries, all her fears about the stranger and his intentions began to engulf her again. She couldn't believe that, despite all her efforts, she was confronted with danger once more. Her father's words about always being vigilant pierced her thoughts again. Kate resolved not to remain idle. Now she understood that there was something bigger behind this threat, and if she wanted to protect herself and her mother, she needed to uncover the truth, even if it meant facing her fears. Unable to shake the feeling of unease, Kate returned to her father's old recordings, which she had long neglected. She knew that if she wanted to understand what was happening, she had to delve into his notes. Suppressing her fear, she climbed up to the attic again, where the box containing the tapes and records was stored. Sitting on the floor, Kate spread out the recordings before her. She switched on the tape recorder and began to listen carefully, paying closer attention to the details this time. In discussing the stranger, her father noted his strange habits. He often appeared in different neighborhoods, but he was primarily seen near schools and parks. His behavior caused her father deep concern, and with each recording, Kate became increasingly aware that this was a person with a troubling history. On one of the tapes, her father mentioned an incident where this stranger had stalked a woman, whom he described as his neighbor. She recounted how he followed her home and even attempted to engage her in conversation as she walked back from work. The woman felt unsafe, and her anxiety mirrored Kate's own. Her father emphasized the importance of reporting such incidents to the police and urged vigilance regarding strangers to protect oneself and loved ones. Kate immersed herself in the details, searching for any clues that might indicate the stranger's name or personal details. One note caught her eye, where her father mentioned that the van was not the only vehicle associated with this man. There were other cars he suspected could belong to him or his acquaintances. Every time this stranger appeared, it seemed there was someone else nearby, shadows that never left him alone. A chill ran down Kate's spine as she realized she was investigating something far more troubling than just her childhood fears. This was not merely a problem, it was a real threat. She understood that her father, in trying to protect the family, had not only put himself at risk but had also been warning her of something she couldn't comprehend back then. Now that the van had re-entered her life, Kate knew she had to take matters into her own hands. She resolved to discover who this man was, what his intentions were, and most importantly, what she could do to protect herself and her mother. Rising from the floor, she felt her resolve strengthen. Unraveling this mystery became her new priority, and she was ready to follow in her father's footsteps to uncover the truth. With each passing day, the tension escalated. Kate began to notice strange occurrences that made her heart race. Items in her room would disappear without a trace, her notebook filled with notes, her favorite toy that always sat on the shelf. Each time she found something missing, an overwhelming feeling washed over her that someone or something was behind it. Shadows seemed to move at night, and in the silence, she heard rustlings that filled her with dread. One evening, while sitting on her bed wrapped in a blanket, Kate felt the need to share her experiences with someone. She called her best friend Mark. They had been friends since childhood, and Kate knew she could trust him. As soon as he arrived, she didn't hesitate to dive into her fears. "Mark, I can't stay alone in this house," she said, her voice trembling with anxiety. "It feels like someone is watching me. Things are going missing, and I hear strange noises at night." It all started after we moved and the van reappeared. Mark listened intently, his expression serious. "You're not alone, Kate. If you feel something is wrong, we need to figure this out together," he replied, his eyes glinting with determination. "Let's do some investigating. We can see what we can find in the neighborhood and talk to the neighbors." Kate felt her fear lessen slightly. Mark's presence was comforting, and she knew that with his help, she had a chance to confront the situation. The next day, they started planning how to approach their investigation. They made a list of neighbors to speak with and even decided to walk around the area to see if any other strange happenings had gone unreported. In the evening, as they explored the surroundings together, Kate noticed how Mark had become her anchor. He listened attentively to her thoughts, offered suggestions, and worked to dispel her fears. "If someone is really stalking us, we need to be ready," Mark said as they walked away from her house. "Let's stay vigilant. Maybe we can figure out what's going on before it turns into a serious problem." With each step, Kate felt her confidence grow. Together with Mark, she felt prepared to confront the shadows from her past and uncover who was behind the stranger in the van. Now that they were acting as a team, she felt she could overcome her fears and unravel the mysteries threatening her safety and that of her family. Determined to solve the mystery, Kate and Mark began canvassing their neighbors for information about the man in the van. Every day after school, they organized their inquiries, hoping someone could provide a clue or piece of vital information to help them unravel the enigma. Their first stop was a small woman named Mary, who lived across the street. She appeared friendly and readily agreed to talk. "Of course, I've seen that van," she said when Kate and Mark asked about it. "It often parks by the park, especially in the evenings." With bated breath, Kate felt thoughts buzzing in her mind about the van watching children. "Do you know who drives it?" she asked, looking intently into the woman's eyes, hoping for any information. Mary furrowed her brow, her expression darkening. "I've never seen his face, but there's a chilling story," she began. "Many years ago, a girl went missing around here. She was only 9. She was playing in her yard, and no one saw her after she went to the park." Mary glanced around the street as if fearing someone might be eavesdropping. "The neighbors searched for her for days. Then they found her backpack by an old tree in the park, but the girl was never found," she continued, her voice trembling. "They say she tried to escape from the stranger who had been watching her. Since then, many kids here are afraid to play alone." Kate felt her heart constrict with fear. This story only fueled her anxieties further. She looked at Mark, and in his eyes, she could read the fear and confusion. "What happened to that girl?" she asked, hoping for an answer that might bring her some comfort. Mary shook her head. "No one knows. She just disappeared. But some say the stranger who was watching her was also seen with the van. The police never found him. It remains a mystery." Those words hung in the air like a heavy blow to the heart. Kate sensed they were on the right track, yet she couldn't shake the feeling they were delving into something far more terrifying than mere disappearance. Now, she had a purpose: to learn more about that girl and her disappearance, as well as the man in the van. Gathering the information, Kate and Mark thanked Mary and left her home. On their way back, Kate continued to reflect on what she had learned. A new question loomed in her mind: if that girl had vanished, how could she be certain that she and her mother were safe? Their investigation had taken on an even greater significance. It was no longer just about the van, it was about how to protect themselves and their loved ones from an unknown terror that still lurked in the shadows. With each passing day, Kate and Mark edged closer to the truth, and with that proximity, growing anxiety began to tighten around her heart. Every step in their investigation unveiled more details about the man in the van and the mysterious girl who had disappeared years ago. But one morning, when Kate returned from school, her life changed forever. She noticed a small envelope lying by her door. Her heart raced as she bent down to pick it up. Kate glanced around, but there was no one in sight. A sense of dread crept into her mind as she unfolded the envelope and read the letter written in a shaky hand. "Stop your investigations. "This is your final warning," it said. Inside, her stomach tightened. Those words felt like a cold shower, engulfing her in fear. Someone knew about her actions. Someone was watching her. Panic washed over Kate as she realized her safety was at stake. She tossed the letter on the table and darted to the window, peering outside, trying to understand who could have done this. But there was no one, only the evening light casting shadows on an empty street. "Kate?" came Mark's voice as he entered. She quickly turned and showed him the letter, watching his face pale. "This is serious," he said, scrutinizing every word. "We need to tell your mom." Kate, still in a daze, shook her head. "No, she's already worried about everything. I don't want to add to it," she whispered, feeling anxiety choke her throat. Instead, her determination only strengthened. She couldn't let someone intimidate her. That was exactly what they wanted. "We can't stop, Mark. If we back down, it will only get worse," she asserted, her voice gaining confidence. "We have to find out who is behind this and why. This isn't just intimidation, it's serious, and we can't ignore it." Mark nodded, his resolve bolstered too. "All right, we'll continue, but let's be careful. If this person truly threatens you, we need to be vigilant." Kate understood the situation was becoming dangerous, but fear couldn't stop her. Instead, it fueled her desire to uncover the truth. They began to plan their next steps, paying attention to details and gathering evidence. With the letter tucked in her pocket and resolve in her heart, Kate took a step into the abyss, ready to confront the dark shadows that threatened her life and safety. Her investigation was no longer just a hobby, it had become her mission. And she knew she couldn't give up. Realizing that the stakes were getting higher, Kate and Mark decided to take decisive action. They needed to catch the man in the van red-handed. They began discussing how to organize surveillance around their neighborhood. It was a risky game, but they had no other choice. Kate understood that they had to stay one step ahead to expose him and protect herself and her mother. They met in the park, where no one could overhear them. Kate pulled out a notebook and began jotting down ideas. "We need to set up cameras," she suggested. "If we can capture him on film, it will help convince the police that he's a real threat." "Agreed," Mark replied, nodding. "We can place several cameras around our house and in the park. I can bring my old night vision camera. It's not the best, but it should help in the dark." Kate felt her heart race with excitement. "All right, let's plan where to set them up," she said, tracing her finger over a neighborhood map she had printed out. They marked a few key spots: the corner of the street where the van was often seen, and the path leading to the park where the girl had vanished. As they discussed their strategy for camera placement, Kate suggested another idea. "Let's set up night watches. We can take turns monitoring the situation and documenting everything we notice." Mark nodded, and they agreed on a schedule for their watches. Kate felt her confidence returning. Together, they were becoming stronger and able to tackle this threat. They took on the responsibility not just for their safety but for that of their neighbors. That evening, they began setting up the cameras. Mark brought his old camera, while Kate found a few others they could use. At first, they were excited, but with each camera they installed, the tension mounted. Once everything was ready, Kate felt a rush of adrenaline. "Now we just have to wait," she said, gazing at the darkening sky. "We need to stay alert." Kate and Mark organized their first night watch. They chose a spot where they could conveniently observe the street while remaining hidden. Hours passed, and the stillness of the night began to weigh heavily on them. The darkness seemed endless, and Kate felt fear creeping back in as time dragged on. But they couldn't give up. Every rustle, every movement outside their view had them on edge. Kate knew they were on the brink of uncovering the truth. They had to be ready when the moment came. Their patience and determination became their best allies in this dangerous game, and they were resolute in bringing the man to light. The night grew particularly tense as Kate and Mark sat hidden, intently watching the street. Their hearts beat in sync with the silence around them. Every sound and every movement seemed exaggerated, and their eyes appeared to catch even the smallest details. Then, as if summoned by a spell, they saw it. The old van that seemed to emerge from the shadows once more. Kate froze, while Mark grabbed her hand. "That's him," he whispered, eyes glued to the vehicle slowly approaching the intersection. Kate nodded, her heart racing. "Let's go, we have to follow him." She quickly grabbed her camera to document the moment, and together with Mark, they rushed out of hiding. The van, unaware of their pursuit, turned the corner. Fueled by adrenaline, Kate and Mark ran after it, trying to stay unseen. The van moved slowly but steadily, as if aware that no one would dare follow it. With every passing minute, the tension escalated. Where was he heading? Mark kept pace, focused on not falling behind. "We can't lose him," he said, panting but resolute. "If he leads us to where he hides his secrets, we need to be ready." The van disappeared into the shadows of an old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Kate and Mark halted at the edge of the road, crouching behind high bushes. The warehouses looked deserted, but inside lay a mystery they were desperate to uncover. Kate felt fear clenching her chest again, but instead of retreating, she stepped forward. "We need to get closer," she whispered. Mark nodded, determination etched on his face. They cautiously approached the entrance, striving to make no sound. Once inside the warehouse, an overwhelming sense of unease enveloped them. The dark corners and crumbling walls created an atmosphere of dread, but Kate was resolute in her quest for answers. They moved cautiously, straining to hear any sounds when suddenly, footsteps echoed in the distance. Kate and Mark exchanged frightened glances. Where had they ended up? This was a dark place filled with secrets and potential threats. With each step they took, the situation grew more perilous. They sensed they were nearing something significant, perhaps the answers they had been seeking. With their hearts pounding in unison, they knew they had to act swiftly. Time was against them, and they were prepared for whatever dangers lay behind those walls, knowing it could change their lives forever. The warehouses resembled abandoned mazes, and each step that Kate and Mark took echoed like a challenge to the silence. Their hearts pounded with fear and adrenaline as they delved into dark corners filled with dust and shadows. The walls were worn, and the darkness concealed everything that could pose a danger. But they knew this was the only way to uncover the truth. In one of the rooms, a shocking sight met their gaze. Photographs lined the walls, countless images of Kate and other girls from the neighborhood. Their faces were captured in various situations, playing on the playground, leaving school, and walking in the park. All of them stared directly into the lens, and in their eyes, an invisible threat could be seen. A cold terror enveloped Kate. "Mark, look," she exclaimed, pointing at the photos. "This is madness. He's been watching us." Mark stepped closer, his eyes widening in horror. "Who is he? What does he want?" he asked, but then their attention was drawn to the sound of footsteps. They froze, and their hearts raced faster. The door creaked open, and the man from the van entered the room. He looked menacing, his eyes glowing with hatred as he saw them. Kate felt everything inside her freeze. "What are you doing here?" he growled, his voice low and filled with fury. Without hesitation, Kate and Mark dashed towards the exit, feeling their adrenaline surge. With every second, fear escalated, and they understood this was not just a game. It was life or death. "Run!" Kate shouted as they raced through the warehouse corridors, hearing the man's footsteps behind them. Each step brought them closer to freedom, and they had to find a way out before he caught them. Mark pulled her along, and they burst into another corridor. A sound behind them urged them to go faster. Kate realized that if they didn't escape, it could end in catastrophe. They slammed into a door, and thankfully, it was unlocked. Bursting outside, they didn't look back, just ran until they reached a safe zone. Kate and Mark stopped, trying to catch their breath, but their hearts still pounded with fear. "He was watching us," Kate said, her voice trembling with horror. "We need to report this to the police." Mark nodded, but there was something else in his eyes, fear. "It could be dangerous," he said. "He knows who we are." Kate understood that this was not just a question of safety. It was the beginning of something much bigger, and they were both at the center of the storm. But one thing was clear, they couldn't let this man continue to terrorize them and others. Determination burned in their hearts, and they were ready to fight for the truth. Kate stood by the window, watching the darkening sky. Her thoughts were filled with anxiety and determination. She understood that hiding no longer made sense. Action was required. The man they encountered in the warehouse posed a real threat, and now that she had evidence of his malicious intentions, she was determined not to let him go unpunished. "I have to end this," she said aloud as she remembered the tapes her father had stored in the attic. They were the only evidence that could help her not only expose the man but also protect other children in the neighborhood. Kate took action. She called her friends, including Mark, and gathered them at her house. When they all arrived, she looked at their concerned faces. "We have to stop him," she said, trying to sound confident. "I have the tapes on which my father recorded his observations. This will help us tell the police the truth about what he did." Mark nodded. "You're right. If we have evidence, we can convince the police to take action. But we need to be careful." Kate looked at her friends gathered around her. They were all ready to help, but she felt they needed more than just support. "I'm going to call the police," she declared. "And we need to meet them at the place where we last saw him." Gathering themselves, they began to plan their actions. Kate decided that they needed to be ready to confront him. With her friend's help, she gathered all the tapes and notes from her father to present the police with comprehensive evidence. As they left the house, Kate's heart raced. She knew it could be dangerous, but the desire to protect herself and her friends outweighed her fear. Soon, they met with the police at the abandoned warehouse. The officers looked at them warily, but determination shone in Kate's eyes. "We saw that man," she began, showing the tapes. "Here's proof that he's been watching us. He threatens not only me but also other girls in our neighborhood. We have to stop him." The police exchanged glances, and one of them stepped closer. "We need to understand how serious this is," he said, examining the tapes carefully. "If this is true, we'll need to act." Kate felt the tension in her chest begin to ease. She knew they weren't alone, and they had a chance to put an end to this nightmare. "Please trust us. He can't continue to threaten us unpunished," she said, trying to convince them of the importance of her cause. The officers began taking notes and asking questions, and Kate sensed her fears start to dissipate. With the support of her friends and the police, they were ready for the final battle against this threat. Now she knew they weren't just seeking the truth, they were fighting for the safety of their neighborhood. And she was prepared to face her fears to protect herself and those she loved. The headlights of the police cars flickered in the darkness like beacons of hope in a stormy sea. Kate stood next to Mark and their friends, her heart pounding in anticipation. Together with the police, they waited for the moment when the man would appear again. And that moment seemed to be approaching. Kate clutched the tapes in her hands, which had become symbols of their struggle. Each time she heard her father's voice on the recordings, she felt his support and courage. Today, she couldn't afford to give up. She knew she had to be strong not only for herself but for everyone who was in danger. Finally, the van appeared in the darkness. Kate's heart clenched with fear and determination. She pointed it out to the police. "That's him," she shouted, indicating the man who stepped out of the vehicle. "That's the guy." The police, responding to her signal, began to move towards the van, and Kate felt the tension in the air escalate. They surrounded the man, and he noticed, trying to flee, but he was quickly apprehended. Kate watched with bated breath as the officers placed handcuffs on his wrists. "You're under arrest for stalking and threats," one of the officers stated. A mix of fear and relief hung in the air as Kate realized that this was finally coming to an end. Kate stepped closer, and the officer who had questioned her turned to her. "You did an excellent job, Kate. We checked his records, and he's wanted for several disappearances." These words hit her like thunder on a clear day. She felt the world around her begin to spin as the realization sank in. "How is that possible?" she asked, not believing her ears. "Is he involved in this?" The officer nodded, and Kate felt a colossal weight lift from her shoulders. She had done what she thought was impossible, and now this nightmare was close to being over. However, as she looked at the man, his cold gaze left a sinister mark on her soul. Despite the arrest, a feeling lingered that the shadow of his presence still hovered around. With each passing minute, Kate realized this was not the end, it was only the beginning of a new struggle. Perhaps she wouldn't be able to easily rid herself of the fears that had taken root in her soul. "By overcoming fear, you become stronger," she quietly told herself as the van drove away and the night began to lift. Kate knew that she now had to not only cope with what she had experienced but also move forward to ensure her and her friends' safety. Kate stood at the threshold of her home, breathing in the fresh morning air. The day was warm, and sunlight flooded the world with bright colors as if inviting her into a new life. Yet deep down, she knew that recent events had forever changed her perception of the world. A few days ago, she faced the greatest threat of her life, and although the man's arrest brought relief, the feeling of anxiety still clung to her. With each minute, She understood that the scars left on her soul might not heal immediately, but that didn't stop her from embracing her new reality. Kate decided she wouldn't allow fear to dictate her life. She began exploring her feelings and finding strength in each moment she had experienced. Together with her friends, they organized a group to help other children and their parents stay safe and recognize potential threats. Every evening, they gathered, sharing stories and supporting each other, creating a strong community that helped everyone cope with their experiences. At the same time, Kate began engaging in sports and creative pursuits, trying her hand at painting and writing stories. This became a form of therapy for her, a way to express her emotions and fears through brushstrokes and words. She realized that this not only helped her but also benefited others who had faced similar experiences. One day, while painting under the bright sun, a thought struck her: although the shadows of the past might linger behind, that didn't mean she couldn't chase the light. "This is just the beginning," she whispered to herself, staring at the canvas filled with vibrant colors. With each stroke, she transformed her fears into hope, and this realization inspired her to keep moving forward. Through it all, Kate learned the value of friendship and community. The bonds she forged with her friends strengthened her resolve. They were all willing to fight for their safety and help others along the way. Together, they formed an unbreakable bond, promising to always watch out for each other, even in the face of darkness. As she stood before her finished painting, Kate smiled. It depicted a bright future, filled with light and possibilities. The past was now just a part of her story, but it didn't define her. Instead, it became a source of strength and determination. She was ready for whatever lay ahead, embracing the new beginning with open arms and a fearless heart.